back. It's Sunday night. We're on to. Always takes me a minute and a half or two or three. There I am. There you are. Welcome. I got a good show. This is such a thing. This is reactor 1 on the bottom. This is what it would look like on the top. And so, something strange going on when they're saying they got the fuel out of a pool that doesn't exist. We got 3 stories. TEPCO begins removing fuel from the risky pool. Risky. We done a whole presentation on that last week or the week before, I think it was. Fukushima nuclear plant struggles to clear radioactive waste. That's the biggest portion of tonight. That's a super important show. 5.6 million cubic meters of radioactive waste just at the Fukushima site is 22,400 miles of 1-ton trucks. That's absurd, right? From a single site. And it's radioactive waste. Don't worry, everything will fit into an Olympic-sized swimming pool. I'm going to start off with a great song. I'm just going to look at the poll right quick, wherever you may be. Do Fukushima's 1 gram of fuel loss, it was less than a gram. That's the song we're going to start off with. It was just posted a day ago. Reactor 2 claims prove the nuclear industry is untrustworthy. It's untrustworthy. And so, the world is crazy. And this story here, Fukushima communities work to preserve disaster site. This is in Akuma, the actual nuclear meltdown itself. I must have the audio off. And we're going to hit a song called Less Than a Gram. It's about the first story tonight. That out of the destroyed reactors, they only got less than a gram at a reactor 2. And the punchline is, right alongside of it was reactor 3. It's quite the punchline. Okay, we'll be right back after this song. Fantastic song, Less Than a Gram, a little over 2 minutes. Enjoy. It's going to be hard to play ball. Now what? No audio? Just give me 1 second. Looks like my head is... There we are. I just turned the volume on. There it is. I'll be right back.
Right beside old Unit 3 sits a shell-marked waste, you see. Tanks of resin stacked with care, holding what the pumps caught there. TEPCO filed 2 plans to show. One says yes, the other no. Each awaits a coming call. Neither clears the path at all. That's what they've got from Unit 2, and that was a lot. Fuel remains in buried rooms while they measure water plumes. Early 30s, so they say, when might get underway. Decommissioned down the line, mid-century's hopeful sign. 880 tons remain, none retrieved from three's domain. They debate what space to claim, still the building stays the same. Less than a gram, that's what they've got from Unit 2. A careful shot, not from 3, not from 4. Still they work around the door. Less than a gram, still asking for
Those crazy graphics, holy shit. So that's next level graphics. That was really good. Let me just go back to that for 1 second.
from Unit 2.
Where am I, To? Where are you, To? This is a depiction of the robot they're using. Really, it's really good stuff. Look at this. Wow. That's reactor 3. And I mean, look at this, what he's got done here. Like, wow. And he's got the real guys. You got that creature down on the end down there. That's the government mouthpiece. In particular, these are academics that are naturally going to be scumbags. I'm just kidding. Just keep her going. The graphics on that is just wow. James, man. That blows my mind. And the song is just holy shit stuff. Let's get after it. We got a big show ready to go. Hey, you're not the only one who can't spell words. Shit, James. Don't worry about it, buddy. Thank God for autocorrect on my side. All right. Let's get after it here. TEPCO begins removing fuel from the risky pool, fuel from the pools. The reactor cores from the fuel pool. And then this is the major story to tonight. There's a lot of new information in this story. This is the second story. And this is your third story. And they're all shocking, really, right? So right alongside of reactor 2 was reactor 3. And when I say was, I mean was. Here we go. Here's the picture because I wanted the picture to fill up the thumbnail. So it looks a little more, it's a little hard. I don't know if it is or not, I suppose. That was the original framing of the first picture. And you can see in the center, I was trying to mash them together. Emphasis on the word mash. So there's reactor 1, right alongside, that blew up and lost its fuel pool. They covered it up successfully. This is reactor 2. That lost 8 or 9 reactor cores in the fuel pools, and the reactor core itself, it was running. And when you shut it down for the control rods did go in these reactors, and they said they shut them down, but it doesn't actually shut it down. It takes quite a few days to shut it down. So the heat and the pressure was enormous, and then there was no water to cool it down. You need 4,500 tons a minute. Think of a 71-ton pickup trucks going past your driveway every minute? How do you every second, rather? How are you going to back out 4,500 million gallons a minute, 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks with 1,000 liters each in 24 hours had to be dumped on the reactor. It overheats. So if it doesn't get 6 million, which is a row of one-ton pickup trucks, each with 1,000 liters in it, wrapped around the entire planet, bumper to bumper. If it doesn't get that after 24 hours, what do you think is going to happen? The heat, because the heat is going to keep heating, right? Because it was already boiling water for millions of homes and businesses. We're not talking about a furnace. We're talking about a machine that's boiling water for 1 million homes and businesses every second, 24 hours a day. It needs an enormous amount of water to produce the steam for that magic trick, right? It's the wrong technology. There's 1 million companies, corporations, in order to build a nuclear plant. It's pretty stupid, right? Don't look at the carbon footprint of the 1 million companies that are working just to build it before it even gets running. It needs 2 gas and oil coal plants dedicated to it 24 hours a day to power it. Can't run on its own power. Can you imagine how much energy it takes to pump 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks every 24 hours? Just that little trick alone. They need their own dedicated gas, oil, coal fuel plants. Reactor 2 was the only building that kind of looked like it was intact. So there's Reactor 3, for instance. But immediately, that's what Reactor 3 and 4. Right alongside of Reactor 3 was Reactor 2. And on the other side of that was Reactor 1. All 4 of them melted down at the one time. And it's hard to comprehend. With Reactor 3, you can see the inventories, which was around 9 reactor cores ejected right out of the building. This was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. And this contraption, it doesn't matter, there's health consequences for being on the site. So, so this is the wrong picture, I guess, but don't worry about that picture, it was from another story. This is 23 hours of radioactive fallout. I'll give you a better depiction coming up. This is, you lost the inventories, and that's confirmed when you look at the stump of the building after. For instance, right here. So fuel pools at the top of the building, reactor cores. Now, in the middle of all that was Reactor 2. 9 years on, they went back into the control room of Reactor 4, I think it is, which is separate. But 7 years, they didn't go back into that room. Those entering the control rooms must wear clothing designated for the yellow zone. Paper suits, 3 pairs of gloves, 3 pairs of socks, boots, full face mask, a helmet, a Dr. Pepper, some toothpaste. And so there's 70 identical reactors in the United States. I'm just doing an introduction to the site for people that are uninitiated, just as a courtesy to this planet. Reactor 4 to your left is clearly not there. These were 190-foot buildings, 19 stories, 65-meter buildings. So when you see CBS, which is the biggest media in North America, Seth Dorn is a senator or something, by the way. BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes, is an Asian correspondent. He'd done the same thing for Reactor 3. Now he's claiming, both of them are claiming they're 150 feet above the stump of one of the Medusas at Fukushima Reactor 4 in particular. CNN's worldwide. ABC Australia is the biggest on that continent. Cecilia Vega is currently White House press secretary. Makes $1 million a year. Big shot, right, to a police officer. They're all in on it, right? In order for that lie to work, they all have to work together and tell the same lie. Right? Does anybody really think that at the top, 150 feet above that stump are these people? If you do, if you do, we want to hear from you. The lines are all open, 740-4077 here in Canada. We love to hear from you. If you think they're on top of the building to your left, give us a call. Big shot. We want to hear it. Hang on. I'll get there. Let's keep her yucky here. So this is the top of Reactor 1 before and after. And nothing got out. Nothing got out of this building. I know what you're saying, Dan. It's all gone. No, it never got out. I hear you. Nothing got out. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We're not crazy at all. So reactor 4 to your left. What they done was, it was originally looked like that over there, right? They stumped it down. The tellers are stumped. They done the same thing with reactor 3. To your left, they stumped that down too. So they stumped down reactor 3 and 4, and they put these contraptions parallel to it. They don't physically touch it. They cantilever over it. There's nothing inside of it, and these panels are the only structure at the top of it besides these stupid tubes, which are meant to mimic the interior. The interior of the original buildings. You can kind of see the same structures in the background. These were vents for hydrogen that were added after. But that structure is where they're claiming to be. And that is, they're looking at the fuel puller right there in a normal looking reactor building. And the robot ham we're talking about in this song we started off with less than a gram is based upon this contraption that took them 4 years or 6 years, whatever it is now. I forget the number, it's $44 million. It's a fishing rod. And it drops down this contraption that got less than a gram in 2 tries. And the idea is to distract you away from the real issues, right? Don't look at that. No, don't look at that. Don't look at reactor 1, look at reactor 2. Ha-ha! Scientists are special, Dana. Now the problem with that site, on both sides of it, reactor 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So if you're working there, you're getting pretty significant doses of radiation. Catastrophic health consequences, like your organs will melt if you're there for a few minutes. And just to help articulate that, I'm just going to show you what low dose radiation does to hospital patients. So you go in, you got a tumor, there's no cure, doctor, please you can do something, this is my loved one, they're special. Yes, doctor says, liquidate your house and your assets, and we'll try radiation therapy. Oh God, doctor, not radiation therapy. Okay, well, we'll try chemos. How about that? Okay, chemo's great. It's not radiation, right? No, it's chemo, it's chemicals. So you inject a bunch of chemicals in your body that are illegal if I done it to you, but it's not illegal if it's in the hospital. Because it's going to kill you, right? It's murder if I does it to you. And when that doesn't work, and it doesn't, the tumor gets bigger magically, because you fed it, then you'll go along with the radiation. And when you get the radiation, this is what ends up happening. And so these are small doses compared to people at this site even today. Even these fictional people that are there. These are crazies that are telling you those stories. Introduction to radiation injury. I'm just going to show you how this kind of works. You get radiation therapy. All of this is radiation therapy. So you got a tumor on your kidney or your liver or your lungs or bless your hearts, wherever. Radiation-induced injury to the vision, which was caused by radioactive fallout in the first place over 80 years. Everybody's entitled to a tumor now, thanks to the nuclear industry, and every species. Radiation-induced injuries to the visual pathways. Radiation injuries to the heart. This is radiation therapy. Radiation-induced cardiac injuries following breast cancer treatment with radiation. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Everything is radiation-induced. Everything is radiation therapy-induced is the better way to frame it. Hypoxia, radiation-induced lung injuries. Blood spinal cord barrier disruption, central nervous system radiation injuries, radiation-induced lung injuries. There's so much of lungs and heart injuries, it blows my mind. And skeleton is missing from this pile. Radiation-induced bowel injuries. So this list, the only thing they can do now is use laser of severe radiation injury. Severe radiation injuries. Because it can't hurt you. It's like a banana, Dana. Radiation-induced kidney injuries, like flying on an airplane, for goodness sake. Central nervous system radiation injury or climbing a mountain, Dana. It's like being in a canoe for 15 minutes. Injury to cranial nerves and or nuclides following proton beams. Proton beam radiation therapy. is nothing compared to what's happening at Fukushima site, by the way. But it's genocide. Properties protect lungs from radiation. It's legal genocide. Every hospital worldwide is doing it that can get their hands on it. Oh yeah, we'll do it. Properties protect lungs from radiation-induced injuries. Good luck on that, but it's there for you just in case. It's very rare to see anything with those attributes. Radiation injury to the head and the neck. The assessment of radiation-induced brain injuries. There's an assessment of it because they've never learned nothing. All 80 years of radiation never cured anybody, but we'll get it. We got 1,000 isotopes. We'll get that combination. You know, there's a lot of combinations. We just got to work out the right combination. Yeah, it's going to kill most of the people. We'll figure it out, though. Radiation-induced regional lung injuries, small bowel from radiation injuries, radiation therapy, radiation-related breast injuries / radiation therapy, radiation-induced intestinal syndromes, radiation-induced brain necrosis. Man. I can show you videos about parents and their children with this stuff. It's just, how can people do that to other people? Radiation-induced normal tissue injuries. You're going to get injured if you use it, period. It's normal. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injury. Don't forget all these people are sending their children to private school and taking them on world cruise vacations to ease their pains of conscience that they might have. Radiation injuries to the heart muscles, heart valves. Excuse me, I'm burping out loud there. Patients with radiation-induced bowel injuries. Promise through it. All the people at the site are being pounded with this stuff. Radiation injuries to the central nervous system. If you checked every person that ever worked at Fukushima, you're going to find one of these, or many of these, I should say. Radiation rectal injuries, because you get radiation therapy and you might end up with 6, 7, 8, 9 of these side effects, let's call it. Acute injury of the glands, all your glands, not just your. Radiation-induced liver disease. Oh, it gives diseases, does it? It's a biological weapon, see? Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. Is there anything this thing doesn't attack? Nothing. And so we're pretty tolerant. Imagine what's happened to the species. An experimental study on the acute, like fish and trout and frogs and the keystone species, you know. Nothing important, just the most important species on the planet. Experimental study on acute brain radiation injuries. Experimental study. Every time I read that, I'm always like, my brain always goes, and you got every university done this study multiple times already on different victims. None of them seen the other one's studies because can't get a consensus that way. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Did I mention radiation-induced brain injuries and radiation-induced brain injuries from radiotherapy? Good news, kids. Your mother's getting radiation therapy. Yay! We're going to bake cakes and raise money for mom so she can get her radiation therapy. Modifications, radiation-induced brain injuries. Brainstem injuries. So imagine working at Medusa, the nuclear meltdown. Imagine working in an environment where around 36 reactor cores were ejected or released into the direct environment and worldwide. Like a banana doll, see? Nothing to worry about. Except for the radiation-induced brain injuries and the language decline after radiation therapy. 2 more. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Did I mention radiation brain injuries? How about reoccurring brain tumors from radiation injuries? Do you get a lollipop with it? Yes, of course, Timmy. Okay, I'll be okay, doctor. Of course you will, Timmy. I'm Dr. Jed. Boom, 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 boom. Let's go. Let's rock and roll. Let's get it on. I went a bit quicker than normal tonight. TEPCO begins removing fuel from the risky pool at number 2 reactor. What the hell is this contraption? They never show you pictures, so I always got to find you. They'll show you this picture, but it doesn't give you no context, right? Give me a second, I'll get it for you. Media never gives you anything. They tell you a story. They tell you a lolly. It's just such a strange story, isn't it? such a strange story. Here we go. I gotta get into context. TEPCO began removing fuel from the risky pool June the 2nd, 2 months ago. I said a couple of weeks ago, Lloyd, sue me. So this is the contraption, and you can see the similarity right here. See the roof, see the walls? That's going to reach in and pull the fuel out of the fuel pool that doesn't exist on a building that is already confirmed to lost its entire inventories. Let's just move the goalpost whenever you feel like it, I suppose. 3 crane system for spent fuel removal at the number 1 nuclear power plant's number 2 reactor. The number 2 reactor. Less than a gram got out officially that they recovered with the first call. The first contraption, I know. There it is right there, that thing there. At the tip of it was just, it got less than a gram, like the, what was it, less than a grain of rice the first time, and less than that the second time or something. Right? Don't look at these reactors. Oh, look at number 2. Look at this. That looks a lot better, see? Gotta delete that because I got... I smurfed up here. Hang on. That's a good picture. Toshiba. They've done the same thing for reactor 3, Toshiba, right? Did I get that picture? Let me see. Yeah, Toshiba's all in on being evil. They're nuclear, right? They faked being on reactor 3, and now they're faking reactor 2. Yeah, it's... reactor 3, I want it. Let me see if I get lucky. That'll work. That's a money shot, though. There it is. There's the money shot right there. Media representatives walk on top of number 3 reactor building at Fukushima. Ho ho! Toshiba. See Toshiba? This is Leslie on top of reactor 3. As far as I know, top of reactor 3 is up there somewhere. As sure as hell ain't at reactor 3, which is right alongside of reactor 3. So the guts are spilled out. And don't worry though, we're here at reactor 2. Everything's great. Have a nice day. On June 2nd began the delicate process of removing fuel assemblies. Now, its fuel assembly is 100 fuel rods. The fuel rods are 18 pounds and 12 feet long. Not according to these crazies, is not, but this fuel storage pool has 3 decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the building. That's why they're pretending they're way up in the sky, right? That's the official original picture. Or that's the official picture 2 months ago. Okay, I'll get there. The operation is a third of its kind following the complete removal of the spent nuclear fuel from the pools in number 3 and 4 reactor. These are complicated stories, by the way, so I have to methodically make sure I give you the best chance there is at understanding the story. So you need to see that there's actually 4 reactors in a row. All of them lost their what they call inventories. Inventories are decades of reactor cores that were stored at 2 pools at the top of the buildings because you don't have a repository. And so they pull out about 1/3 of a reactor core every 12, 14, 15 months. And it gets to different things happening, right? So some might come out earlier, a month later, or whatever. So I'm going to focus on reactor 3 and 4 in particular, because that's clearly, you can tell clearly that these buildings don't exist anymore. These are no longer 19-story skyscrapers, apartment buildings, or 190-foot industrial buildings, or 65-meter nuclear reactor, like 150 feet wide, to give you context of what you're looking at there. So reactor 3 and reactor 4. And so they built these contraptions off-site, reactor 3, reactor 4, and they installed it over the stumps of the reactor, and they hoodwinked everybody. As you can see, you'll never see this picture anywhere else. You'll never see this picture unless it came from my site, anywhere else on the planet. Because there was only one picture that got accidentally released in the media in the early years. It was very high quality. We were able to zoom in and extract these types of documentation. This is unassailable evidence. Not that you need it, because if you're honest and you look at those two buildings, you'll already acknowledge that fuel pools are gone. Don't let that spoil a good story. The operation is the third of its kind, following the completed removal of the spent nuclear fuel, which is 16, 17 reactor cores, but they downplayed that, of course, too, at the number 3, number 4 reactors. Well, their inventories were at the top of the building, so number 3 and 4 are number 3 is right here, and number 4 is the far one. Number 2 is the one in the middle between reactor 3 and reactor. And now, reactor 1 and reactor 3, both of them on video had blown up, so we can kind of show you. Now, the building in between this is reactor cores coming down and landing on the building. The building never had any cooling like the rest of the reactors. These were successfully covered up. I'm just trying to make you appreciate how crazy it is to try to articulate a story where everything is the official story, everything is a lie. The story I'm going to show you, if I don't provide you all this documentation, I'm going to sound like a fucking crazy guy, right? Excuse the French Canadian I might. Okay. At the number 2 reactor, 650 fuel assemblies, which is number 2 reactor. So they're saying there was, even though it's been running for 3 decades, they're saying there's no fuel in the building. Well, they're saying there was a reactor core and another reactor core in the fuel pool, but everything else. The reason this story is so far-fetched on top of this is because they're trying to use such a little number. Right? Because the population is 15 years removed. It's a very complicated story, very convoluted story, and it's very difficult for anybody fresh in the conversation to articulate, right, the enormous amount of equations that are involved in a story like this. And then the lies, how many people are articulating the lies, helping educate the population, is just heartbreaking. Will be transferred to a safer common use pool at the plant site by fiscal. So the common spent fuel pool is behind, across the street, west, across the street from reactor 4 and reactor 3. It's a lower building. It's a lower building. I'll look for some pictures for you very quick. Here we go. It just takes a few seconds. It's okay, gotcha. It's such a strange story. There were 736 mystery pictures released, and they were taken from a drone at a very high altitude. Right after the nuclear event in Japan. And it's reactor 3, reactor 4. But look up there is the common spent fuel pool, and it's all pixelated out. But the original drone footage, unless you zoom right in, you won't notice the pixelation. It was a very high quality. Obviously, this was a military drone. And then it was released up on TEPCO's website. I found it on a Chinese story that linked over to to compress files that were full of 738 pictures. And I've done a whole presentation just on them. It's called, on my site here, environmentalist Dana Durnford on YouTube, you'll find 738 mystery pictures. You put that into my YouTube video search engines, you'll find it. So why would you pixelate the entire property itself and the structures? And this is a small, it's not a skyscraper like the reactors, for instance, but it's right across the street, so the tsunami ran right through it. And let me get one more picture. That's what makes this story crazy, is you're up against so many laws, you can't keep up with all the laws. And so the picture, 736 pictures were unique in one thing. Each picture would start in a weird spot, right? And then it would lead you directly to something like this. And then it would start somewhere else, and then there would be a series of pictures going across the site would lead you to another spot, a pixelated like Reactor 6 was. Somebody was trying to warn you in 2021 on the 10th year, in January, and these pictures got released. But I'm the only person who ever shows these pictures or ever talks about them, as far as I know, in worldwide, again. So behind that, you're seeing transport trucks stacked up from the tsunami coming in on both sides of the building. This is on the same street. Now, it has windows down low, because it's not a reactor building, even though it's a reactor building full of decades of reactor cores from 6 reactors. But, you know, the top of the buildings at the site are stuffed full of reactor cores. Each reactor is, because you don't have a repository in the fuel pool. Common spent fuel pools can only hold a certain amount, which is around 11 million pounds, which is, I think, double the capacity that it should be originally, but they changed the rules to allow that to happen. As far as we can tell, that was lost. There's no other reason to pixelate everything out. The work started at noon, involving a remote-operated crane can lift the fuel assemblies, each about 4 meters long and 250 kilograms. Well, that's not true. They're 1,800 pounds, not 500 pounds. And assemblies are not, they're 3 meters. They're 12 feet, not 4 meters. They're 1,800 pounds, not 500, and they're 12 feet long. Each fuel rod is 100 pounds, or 18 pounds, and there's 100 fuel rods in assembly. And it's packed because they don't have a repository, and so you have every square inch now jammed with fuel, which is done the same thing for the identical reactors. There's 70 of them in the United States, has the exact same attributes, configurations. The fuel assemblies, each about 4 meters long, weighing 250 kilograms, is a complete lie. They're 1,800 pounds and 12 feet long. The crane will place the assemblies in a metal container called a cast. These typically weigh around 50,000 pounds. And you can put several of the real assemblies, the 1,800 pounders, not the fake ones, 500 pounders. Fuel can be moved to a safer pool. These are, well, first off, the fuel is splitting atoms. If it's exposed to oxygen, it'll blow up. It'll catch fire and blow up right away. The zirconium cladding will burn at 1,800 degrees. The fuel pellets are also, the uranium plutonium fuel pellets are inside the fuel rods, which are zirconium, made of zirconium, known as zirconium cladding. The fuel pellets are stuffed into them, right? Plutonium, uranium, plutonium, uranium. They have these different configurations. Now, Reactor 3 was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. This was reclaimed, plutonium, uranium, has already gone through a chain reaction at a nuclear reactor. So this stuff is incredibly stupid. It's illegal in Canada, the United States, but the national laboratories are experimenting with it, but it's illegal to actually do it. They're changing the rules to accommodate it. They need it for the HALEU fuel, right? The high assay fuel, which is that song, Less Than a Gram. That was, her fictional name is Haley, or Cassidy Haley, is it? HALEU? It's a pretty good spin on words, actually. The fuel, which is Korean records. That's a business, right? This song. I have permission to use the music. The fuel can then be moved to a safer pool in a 50,000 container underwater. Puts on a truck, driven across the street in a special truck. But the fuel pool, there's no evidence that the common spent fuel pool is functional or didn't lose its inventories. And there's a lot of evidence suggesting it did. And it's the same thing for reactor 6. So you're better to err on the side of caution than it is to pretend it never happened, because you can't explain away the 738 mystery pictures, and you can't explain away the pixelation of reactor 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the common spent fuel pool, and another couple of spots on that site. And links are under that video. To those original pictures of TEPCO's website, by the way. The transfers of assemblies is essential for the entire decommissioning process. Is essential. That's exactly what they said for reactor 3. That's the exact words, remember? If the fuel pools with around 8 reactor cores were ejected, well, these buildings are 190 feet. What my fingers do is 190 feet. So say 200, 400, 600, 800, 1600, 2100. It's over a kilometer up anyway. Although the storage pool water cools the highly radioactive fuel, the pool remains vulnerable to water level drops from earthquakes and other problems at the heavily damaged plant. A little bit of damage, I suppose. I don't know about heavy damage. Okay, yeah, it's destroyed, actually. You're right. But it depends which side of the train tracks you strut on. Like Derek's saying they're 150 feet above the stump, so if you're only watching mainstream media, you're not listening to other narratives, you're stuck with that narrative. And if you're listening to this on a radio show, then I'm a crazy guy. I'm foolish. I give my number out there. I'm a very public person. I live my life on my sleeve, literally. People love to tear me down without evidence. But when it comes to tearing me down with some evidence, it doesn't work. Their story only works if you don't show pictures. So they don't have any pictures in their story, but I'm showing you these pictures. So do you think that they're 150 feet above the stump? Or is that just crazy talk? Got rid of Dana instead of putting the number up there. 709-740-4076. Prove me wrong. Call in. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Does Fukushima 1 gram fuel loss at reactor 2 claims prove the nuclear industry is untrustworthy? I rest my case. Unlike other reactors, the Site Number 2 reactor building did not suffer a hydrogen explosion after the nuclear crisis unfolded in March 2011, leaving its upper structure intact. Well, the outside shell, the beams, you can actually turn an SUV around on them. That's how big the beams are. Just because it stayed intact, per se, which it didn't entirely, that's for sure, it went China syndrome. Potential global catastrophe from Fukushima Unit 2 highly reactive fuel reactor could be destroyed, making Tokyo area uninhabitable. So if that building is destroyed, you can't go back to Tokyo. If this one is, no big deal. If that one is, no big deal. So don't look at reactor 3. Don't look at reactor 4. Look at reactor 2. Scary. These are goblins. The industry is just full of parasites. And it's not like you join it and then become a parasite. You're a parasite before you get there. You're not getting a job in the nuclear industry in key positions unless you come from a parasitic entity family. Already partially liquefying below the reactors. Like, so, I kind of forgot. When we're talking about the zirconium cladding burning at 1800 degrees, that ignites the plutonium uranium. They burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So I go straight down to the old riverbed. This is where you build your typical reactor. And so there's herds of water running over 24 hours a day. And that's what most of these sites are built over the riverbed, and they go up many meters, even up to 100 feet above it with shale. So everything can run straight down to the riverbed with no obstructions, right? There's a path all the way down. And Fukushima was no different. TEPCO reported the fuel rods number 2 reactor may have partially melted. TEPCO fuel rods in number 2 were fully exposed, and there was a third explosion. The first explosion was the reactor vessel from overheating and pressure, not hydrogen, but pressure. Hydrogen is the cover story. There is hydrogen as the result of the nuclear meltdown. The explosion is from pressure. These are contained vessels already at around 1,000 pounds per square inch, enormous temperatures. They get no cooling. They need enormous amount of cooling. 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks with 1,000 liters each every 24 hours. 4,500 every minute. 71-ton pickup trucks with 1,000 liters each every second. 71-ton pickup trucks going past your house every second to dump water in the reactor. It'll heat up and explode. It doesn't need hydrogen to explode. That's a byproduct of the fuel rods release and becoming particulated. So if the fuel rods are fully exposed, the zirconium cladding catches fire immediately. Well, it heats up, then it spontaneously explodes. Like the zirconium that they were using in cameras in the 20s and early 30s, these great big flashes. And they were sealed flashes. They had zirconium in it. And they had a little hammer come up and break the glass, right? And most of the original cameras, the hammer was built into the flash. So each flash had its own hammer. And then you would pull this great big thing and throw it away, put it on a table, which are now antiques. And so this stuff is heavily radioactive materials, or antiques, where these cameras were used. And so a lot of limousines and legacy vehicles from that era are very suspect. You get in it and take a drive and you end up with getting a cancer, or worse. So when the fuel rods are exposed, they catch fire, they ignite the plutonium uranium, and we're in real trouble. Now the weekend I'm working, I got another package story on a nuclear meltdown in 1985 in Russia, in the Sea of Japan, kind of. And that thing blew up, and there was people vaporized. And then the official story is it ejected the reactor core out of the nuclear submarine. It was at the surface, at a port, and then it all fell right back down into it, so it was contained, right? There's a few leaks there, I think. Some hard cases, but that's what they've been doing for 80 years. They're just predators, right? The whole industry is not about predators. They're very wealthy, so they can influence a lot of people, and they have a lot of monetary to throw around for anybody that's going to play, and it's by design, not by accident. But a large amount of radioactive substances remain trapped inside the building, creating extremely high radiation levels that make humans' access impossible. Ho-ho! Should get them up there. They'll sell the story for you. Large amount of radioactive substance remain trapped in the buildings. They don't give any pictures. You see the picture I'm giving you. The only picture they show is that picture of the crane. That's it. No context. Right? That's why I'm showing you that. They give you some context. That was the original. Do you really think, like the idea that there's the whole, a patch, right? That's assembled off-site, and then it's designed to configure right there. Now, they will go through a few dozen or more homeless, destitute, and victims of society with those types of scaffolding, but you can see reactor 3 is right alongside of it, and it ain't pretty. And then right alongside that is reactor 4. So when you see these people pretending they're at the top of a building and nobody's willing to call them out, we live in a pretty dangerous society. Because in order for that story to work, all the universities have to participate, and all the journalists have to participate in that lie, for that lie to work. All media, there can't be any dissenting voices. Now, I made this video. This is a screen capture from the video I made of them doing it 13 years ago. I got them now, 13 years later. I probably showed that picture 10, 15,000 times. Still nobody's reposting it, like outside of a couple of anti-nuclears that hang out, knowing the difference, right? Doing the best they can. To overcome this challenge, TEPCO constructs a special work platform next to the number 2 reactor building and inserted a crane through a newly created opening in the wall. The crane is controlled from a separate distant building. The process will start with the unused fuel before moving to the spent assemblies. So you can't have unused, there's no reason to put unused fuel in the pool. So why would you do that? Just bear with me. I gotta go. Grab those 2 pictures for you. So you got half a chance of comprehending what we're talking about. They're insane, right? That's the only way to describe these people. They're actually insane. Okay, here we go. I'm going to drag that back down to where I think I was. Yeah, right there, I guess. 388. Here we go. But that means I got to go look up for that other picture to give that context again. Because we done a whole presentation on this less than a week ago, or last week, was it? Okay, hang on. I'll get it. We've done so many presentations on whales. Scattered, right? I've been chewing at the bit to do this show for almost 2 days. Oh, that could be it there. Yeah, that's it. Japan just rolled out this was a story from July the 8th. I'm just going to show you a couple of headlines. This is the Reactor 2 fable. Here we go. So this is the Reactor 2. Now they're not wearing face masks or anything like that. Now we know this is the Reactor 2. And that water above it is meant to wash down the contraption. So here's when here was the experiment itself, right? It's a different altogether. This was the robot. They spent $44 million. Took 4, 5, 6 years to complete. So inside the contraption, right inside of this steel structure, is this room here. And right up by the entrance into Reactor 2, where they're going to reach in to extract the fuel from the fuel pool. So then, it's too much radiation in there, but we're okay here, and we don't need face mask, right, or anything like that. So this is back. That reaches all the way out to here, to there, and then it reaches into the building. I got no idea anymore. But that was the original hole in the back of the building on the seaside. That would be the turbine buildings over there. They done the same fake story for Reactor 4, right? So and they've done the same thing for Reactor 3. So there is a precedence for this. Fuel removal from the storage pool has already been completed, number 1 and 3 reactor and 6 reactors. You got N6 reactors. Already been completed, number 1, 3, and number 6 reactor. They don't say number 6. So they leave that for confusion for people. Well, there's 3 and 4. You didn't get the fuel out of the pools because they were 150 feet above the stumps. So, yeah. Even after the pool is cleared, number 2 reactor still contains melted fuel debris from its core meltdown. So they're above a nuclear meltdown. Like, the whole story is so ludicrous. TEPCO will attempt a third trial removal of debris as early as this summer. TEPCO, which is not a decommissioned authority, they didn't build reactors. They shouldn't be in charge of it. They're just operators. Like you want to be a bus business. You buy a bunch of buses, right? TEPCO wanted to be a nuclear business. They bought a bunch of reactors. You don't build buses. You don't know how to fix buses. There's nobody can fix a reactor. Nobody can fix that. And so the idea is you blame TEPCO for whatever happens, the emaciated whales worldwide, the missing birds, the insects, everything else. Instead of blaming, where it should be blamed is IAEA, United Nations, and the nuclear company spun out of that. IAEA is the orchestrator of all the lies, right? They coordinated all the medias, universities, and that's the only way you can do something like this. You need an enormous amount of influence. Even after the pool is cleared, it's still containing melted fuel debris. TEPCO will attempt a third trial to remove debris this summer. Tons of the melted fuel debris also remains within the number 1 and 3 reactor. Yeah, some of it got blasted down to the reactor, but their version of it is they got the fuel out of the pool and everything's hunky-dory. All right, here we go. Now we're let's get at this little madness, and we'll go over to reactor 1, right alongside of reactor 2, where they're going to just rinse and repeat the same lies. I didn't create the lies, they did, so. Okay. Now, this story is really important, what you're going to pick up from this story. I'm just going to delete everything we covered so far. Clutter. Down the black hole. The bad thing is I got a really good memory. Outside of that, it's gone. Fukushima nuclear plant struggles to clear radioactive waste debris. That was today's story. Is that yesterday's story? Yesterday's story. It came out again a bunch of times today. The exact headlines with the same 4 pictures. We'll get through it here. Wreckage from a hydrogen gas explosion littered the upper floor of the Fukushima number 1 nuclear power plant's number 1 reactor in May, 15 years after. So they're saying this picture is a recent picture. That's an elevator shaft, is what you're looking at there, and that's meant to lower the cast down to a specialized transport truck that would take it across the street to the common spent fuel pool. Nowhere else, just across the street. And it's a special transport truck that was full of transport truck axles with the huge special wheels that turned. Each of them turned. And I traveled at 3 or 4 miles per hour, blah, blah, blah. There is no... Now, what it should look like at the top of the building is this here, above that. Let me bring up the other picture. That's not the other picture of this, where I didn't compress it. I was going to take the night off and just have a fake vacation. But this story's been just eating at my soul since yesterday. And so I had no choice. That's the problem kind of with me when I have a show that I want to do, that fills up my mind until it's over. Which is so hard to find anything. If I don't, here's the picture I'm talking about. So I stretched the picture out for the thumbnail, for this picture. But I kind of like it because you can see a bit better, but that's what it should look like. And it should be way above what you're seeing there. So that chunk right there, this is this is the routine of the nuclear industry. Is going to pretend they're somewhere where they can't be in order to hoodwink you, make you complacent, and get you to basically stop looking at them. Struggles to clean up radioactive waste. I mean, why would they show you, like, I sleep 3 times a day. You know, you're getting old when you sleep 3 times a day. So reactor 3 and 4, reactor 3, reactor 4, this is pointed to where I am, towards the ocean. So you're going away from the ocean, you're going west across Japan towards South Korea and China and Russia. Or South Korea and Russia, rather. North Korea and Russia. Reactor 3 is right alongside of reactor 2. You see reactor 2 up in the top corner. And reactor 3 covered the whole site in at least 9 reactor cores, one of them being a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. So this is what the top of the building should look like. The fuel rods, if they don't get circulation, for instance, they'll melt down. The water will evaporate, and when the fuel's exposed, it'll catch fire, and that'll flash dry the pool. A criticality event would be happening, obviously, at the same time, and you would get a massive explosion. Let me show you the explosion at reactor number 1, actually. Let's play that video, because the story deserves the promise. We don't have a video of reactor 2, because we're just mere slaves. So let me make sure I get the right video. That's reactor 3. All right, that'll work. I think I wanted to show another. I'll show you reactor 3 too, where we're at it, but I think I might zoom in on this one. There it is, yeah. You can see a pulse event, right, when it explodes. Let me do it again. I might have a better video there. I do, actually. That's reactor 1, the one we're talking about right now. We're talking about the whole site, but just kind of a complicated story. It's going to take probably 2 shows to get, not probably, it's going to take 2 shows to talk my way through it. Brutal hot here today. And we're almost at the end of the month. Summer still hasn't really showed up. We had a couple of days, right? 1 or 2 days. We had 4 emaciated whales down there last week. That's reactor 1. This is what they're saying the top of the building looks like. I zoomed in a bit trying to get some context, but it didn't work. None of it worked, right? I was just doing that. It's such a low quality picture. Don't worry about it. We'll get back to the other picture. But we know from just let me bring up a couple of headlines about reactor 1. Now, reactor 1. Yeah, let's do that. There's nothing fast happens around here, by the way. Okay, I got you. That's not what I was looking for, though. It's hard to process, right? I just need a couple of those headlines to help you that I should have had in that spot, but I didn't. And because we've been doing this so long, I don't really have any excuses. There we go. Well, just think about this headline when I'm grabbing the next one. At the time of reactor 2, 1.5 hours later, all fuel rods exposed at reactor 2. That meant it melted down. So then the fuel pool right above it, or alongside of it, is going to melt down too. They're all connected. They're all using. They all have access to the same water at the top for the two fuel pools in the reactor cores. If you blow the reactor core, you lose the fuel pools too. And when you got a meltdown like that, that means you blew it. You told so many lies originally. It's shocking, eh? There's so many apologists for the nuclear industry out there. It's very offensive for me. There we go. I need two headlines to help, because I can bring you 100, but two will work. Up to 1 million sieverts per hour outside of Unit 1. Still too hot to attempt measuring other areas. Yeah, no shit, eh? Number 1 reactor. This is the IAEA, by the way. It's the worst humans imaginable. In March, that the number 1 reactor core started melting 50 minutes after the cooling stopped. Well, once you stop the circulation of the water, it's going to melt down right away. It's going to particulate, and then pressure's going to rise, and then it's just going to be a pressure explosion with some hydrogen as a side dish. Melted polyfuel in 3.5 hours. Well, when it melts at around 9. It doesn't need oxygen to burn, and so it melts at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures and is self-sustaining. It doesn't need oxygen. And it'll consume steel and rebar and cement and mousse or whatever you want to throw on it. And it'll also atomize and aerosol, ionize and radiate that and release that into the environment where it'll destroy millions of creatures and animals and birds for millions of years. There's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So this story, I don't even know where to start with this story. The interior number 10 solid waste storage facility. And so the last thing you gotta do with solid waste is store it in a building altogether. Some kitty litter. This is simply not something you would do. Because the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the alpha rays, the beta shine. Right, it's a lecture of I melt your organs. This play run in and touch the back wall and run out again without melting your organs, dying on the spot. See what makes it the farthest before they die. If this was solid fuel, material from nuclear meltdown, even if it's like 2 foot thick lead boxes, it still you still probably couldn't survive in that environment. Like any kind of emissions we're talking about, it has to be vented, by the way. But you still wouldn't configure it like this. So this is show and tell. Look at the hats over there, for God's sakes. Let's keep our hats in the nuclear wasteland. Yeah, that makes sense. That's the official storage of debris. This is other debris they're alleging. Debris piled under the ground, just leaving it out in the open where the wind and the rain is just going to push it everywhere around. That doesn't make any sense. Right? That makes no sense. And this is not Fukushima site. This is what they're saying. It's Fukushima site. This is not Fukushima site. Containers and wreckage lie in the open at the Fukushima No. 1 nuclear power plant January. They're talking about this year. That's what they're talking about. They're saying that this is this year. Like, first off, if that was real, and you don't have to say remote controlled dump trucks, remote controlled backhoes and cranes and remote control industrial equipment, and you stacked it up and relate that, it doesn't make any sense at all. You would need like a 1 mile exclusion zone around it, let's put it that way. Whoever got the job of putting scaffolding there is long since passed away from the emissions. I doubt highly this is what they're claiming. And if it is after 15 years, just, like this, if this was high-level stuff, and that's what we would be talking about, it's easy for it to have a criticality on its own, even in a small amount, have a nuclear meltdown, which would incinerate probably everything there pretty quick. Like, they're not showing us any kind of towers in the background, any kind of... These shots are up close and looking up in the air. That doesn't even make any sense. 15 years after the nation's worst nuclear accident, the nation's, someone had pains of conscience right there by the sounds of that. The upper floors of number 1 reactor at Fukushima No nuclear power plants, the Daiichi plant, remain littered with wreckage from a hydrogen explosion. These were pressure explosions. I was going to show you the reactor 3 explosion too, wasn't I? Let me show you that. So reactor 3 is, because we don't have a lot of good footage, this was 30 miles away from a security camera, but you can see the pulse, you can see the fuel particulating. Let me go backwards for 1 second. So the building to your left, look at that picture over there, that's the top of the building that the explosion, they're saying exploded. Now those big rectangular gray tubes are empty, they're ventage. They're meant to collect hydrogen and vent it up to tall skinny stacks. Compared to the tall skinny stacks would be those like stacks right there. They're the fuel pool vents. Fuel pool is splitting atoms directly into the environment. So at the top of that building, there's nothing there to create a plume. The only thing that can create a plume is what he's looking at there allegedly was the fuel pool, see? So here, if you keep watching this explosion, watch the very top of it, you're going to see big objects start to fall back down quite quickly any second. This is slow motion. See the big chunks falling back down? That's the fuel pools, to your left in particular. And that's reactor cores. There's 8 or 9 reactor cores falling back down to the earth. The big plume you're looking at will double every second. It's particulates. Each particulate is splitting atoms. This is super slow motion. It's hard to comprehend what you're looking at. I have another way of doing it. So I can get you on the right page anyway. Went the wrong way. There we go. I'll get it right eventually. Trying to get the boat working a week and I fucked that up. Lost all power. I had to order in a tumbler for my Hummer now because I screwed that up. I mean, I got a new pass lock. The whole ignition system showed up. But because of a boo-boo of ChatGP, I got to switch everything out, including the actual key tumbler too. That's got to go. I might have to take the start motor now to get that fixed. It's like $170 or something, but I won't know for another week or two till the other part shows up. Hopefully early next week. We'll see. Radiation levels in the United States West Coast spiked to 1 million times normal. This was the French government. This was based on radioactive fallout in the United States, not TEPCO's numbers, not Japan's numbers. So it was 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. And this plume was the French government. It was modeled the actual numbers. So they made a plume based on numbers that happened in the United States and Canada of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. This plume covered the whole planet. And so all the isotopes are making the exact same plume. All fuel pools are making this exact same plume I'm going to show you. And before I start it, I want you to think of this as the snowstorm in Japan. all the way through. This is a snowstorm, and in 30 days, in 20 days, the snowstorm covers the whole planet. The snow never melts, never goes away, and every snowflake is pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, 600 feet in every direction, and that there's no species on the planet with an autoimmune trigger that can defend against a single atom. With 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. And this is a biological weapon. Every species has been whacked. Every species is making permanent hormones, radioactive hormones, and permanent radioactive stem cells. Every species. And this is why we're seeing the massive decline of species post-Fukushima, because it was a pulse event. But we see this play out for the nuclear industry. The weapons testing created a downward spiral of all the species on the planet. This was a pulse event, and the reactors were built in a place where this was meant to happen. And what I mean by that was they were built on the tectonic plates, which are about 70 kilometers away, and they have a 3,000-year history of tsunamis, right where the plants are too, where you don't build below 300 feet. Right, so they have a 3,000-year history of massive earthquakes and tsunamis because they're on the tectonic plates. They're lousy 70 kilometers away, which means you're on the tectonic plates when it comes to the seismic of Earth, right? Even Tokyo is basically on tectonic plates. And so this was guaranteed to happen. And by putting all the fuel pools at the top of each of the reactors is the stupidest design imaginable. And the architects of that design are still alive today and should be prosecuted for it. They know what they were doing. And that they already know the prevailing winds for anthropogenic pollution. The prevailing winds will get it right across to North America, Canada, United States, Mexico. Within a week, it'll bury the whole country, which suffered triple meltdowns. So the plume is, let me play that again. You're almost at 10 days. You're at 10 days of radioactive fallout there. So there's America, Canada, gone after 15 days. You're almost at day 20. Day 20 is right here of radioactive fallout of 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. Now that same plume is going to be saturated with the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod, which is curium isotopes. Curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Plutonium needs 0.1 inch shielding, whereas curium needs 2 inches of shielding, lead shielding. And cesium, so the reason this is all important is because you have gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas, and they don't mingle with each other. So when they hit each other, they clap, so to speak, and they change direction. So he's traveling almost at the speed of light, 99.9% of the speed of light. He's traveling 99.9% of the speed of light. And when they hit each other, they change direction. That's known as an X-ray. So every species in that plume, which is the entire planet, every human, every animal, every biota, all the fungus, all the bacteria, all the microscopic animals, everything's getting full-body X-rays. That sterilizes them quite quickly, as we know through sex ratio studies done in proximity to nuclear plants that didn't melt down. The reason they're doing that is because they know everybody's getting radiated. Canada done a study of neutrinos that were measured 150 miles away and a kilometer deep in granite. And he still measured the neutrinos, the antineutrinos, from that nuclear site. So you don't want to live within 100 miles of these disease factories as it is. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation directly into the environment. You can't contain it. Calling it a triple meltdown, refusing to acknowledge, by doing that, what they're doing is they're refusing to acknowledge reactor 4, because that's the official picture there. This is the official picture here. Only one could be real. So when you say they suffered a triple meltdown, they're excluding that building there. Why? Because they got a lot. The huge amount of debris must be cleared before the plant operator, Tokyo, operator, not decommission authority, but operator. Tokyo Electric Power Company proceeds with the removal of the spent nuclear fuel assemblies stored in the water-filled cooling pools. I started painting a picture that's not simply, that's what it would look like in a normal building, but we don't have those buildings anymore. located in the upper portion of the number 1 reactor. This is the upper portion of the reactor. It blew up. Now, there's no context, so you can see a person walking there. It's 150 feet wide by 150 feet wide. And that's the first layer of a contraption that they built to put a sarcophagus, a Kevlar sarcophagus around it. So that first layer is right there. Let me go backwards for 1 second. So that top rail up there is that one right here. And so they use cranes. You can see how big the panels are. The cranes this is all built off-site, then assembled by remote control cranes. And then these panels are built off-site, and they're designed to hang there by gravity. And because they're so heavy, they're not worried about wind, right? Right, and then they coop the ground. And the reason for putting that there is try to lower the doses, because the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language, are the victims that are working there. Arnie Gunnison wants you to believe it looks like that, but it actually looks like this. Helen Caldicott, Maggie Gunnison wants you to believe it looks like that when it actually looks like this. So you're up against some pretty slick PR firms. That's the official picture of that. That's the official picture of this. Arnie Gunnison is a really interesting one because he made fuel assembly racks for the fuel pools at 100 identical reactor sites. If he doesn't know the fuel pool is gone, who would? So he's married to Maggie Gunnison, who's a pro-nuclear spokesperson for a couple of decades. 2 and 2 makes 4, that's for sure. The huge amount of debris must be cleaned before the plant operator proceeds with the removal of spent nuclear fuel assembly stored in the water filled. So they're talking like actually everything exists, but they're building a picture so people down the road that are following this, trying to work it out in their minds, right, will have this false picture. That's what they do all the time. Number reactor 1 only holds 391 fuel assemblies in the cooling pool. That's quite the trick. Where were they storing it for the last 30 years then? As the design of the building is 2 spent fuel pools at the top of the buildings. They don't have a repository, so everything stays at the top of the buildings underwater. It has to stay underwater for decades anyway. So you're talking about 8 or 9 reactor cores, 36 total, and 4 buildings are gone. Each of them is equal to about 100 Chernobyls. Just give me a second. I'll turn the volume down so you don't hear that. Turn the volume back on. Goodbye, Dana. I don't often leave the volume off, but that certainly happens. If I don't keep my finger on it, if I keep my finger on it, I'm trained to turn it back up. I took my finger off at that time, but I spent the whole time looking at the button. The number 1 reactor building, like 391 spent fuel assemblies. Let's just do the math on that. Now their version weighs 500 pounds, so maybe we'll use that one. Yeah, let's use their number. I'll bring it up for you. 392 spent fuel assemblies. Here we go. That's not it. Oh, I got number 1 up there. 392, was it? Don't quote me, man. Yeah, 392. See, it must be smart. M-A-R-T, smart. 392 times 1,800 pounds. Each assembly, which is 100 fuel rods. Each rod is 18 pounds. So 1,800 pounds. 100 times 18 pounds. That's 700,000 pounds. There's actually confirmed that these designs, they're designed before the modifications because you don't have a repository to hold 3,450 assemblies, and each of them weighs 1,800 pounds, which is around 6 million pounds. 6.2 million pounds. That's much more realistic. You can't just disappear the fuel assemblies from a fuel pool. And so they're very deceptive, very dishonest, very disingenuous. They have no incentive not to be evil. Apart from the melted nuclear fuel, there's no accountability, no way to hold them accountable. They've never been held accountable in their entire existence. So this current generations of wackos are ruthless, is being employed. A new crane installed on the upper floor of a nuclear meltdown is expected to load debris from the hydrogen explosions, they're not painting you a picture at all, into containers for the transfer to the on-site waste storage facility. They showed you pictures of that earlier, which is stupid. And the clearing work began on June the 22nd. Hydrogen, let's drive that point home. Hydrogen. A new crane installed in the upper floor is expected to load debris from the hydrogen explosions into remember the containers I showed you a little while ago? Containers, they got the pictures there, we showed you that. Transfer to the on-site waste storage facility, we showed you that. The blast blew off the structure's upper floor, scattering numerous pieces of the roof and overhead crane. Well, you can see the structure of the building up there. There's nothing up there. When reactor 1 blew up, there's nothing up there to make a plume that looks like what I'm going to show you. This is number 1 blowing up. And tell me you're ready. There's nothing to make that plume. That plume is a result of what's in the fuel pool. The blast blew off the structure's upper floor, scattering numerous pieces of the roof. Today, the number 1 reactor building is shielded with a giant retractable cover. So it's a big smokehouse with a nuclear meltdown, 8-9 nuclear meltdowns in the center. That's what they're saying. We lost all that inventory. Most of it went China syndrome. The Earth is split in multiple places, and the steam that's coming out of the ground is at lethal doses that they acknowledge multiple times. I can show you those headlines if you like, which measured 56 meters by 66 meters. The cover, together with a new crane, weighed about 7.9 tons, which is 17 million pounds for that cover. And with the new crane, is about 17 million pounds on a nuclear meltdown, which would cave the building in right away, because the neutron bombardment has what they known as the Wigner effect. It breaks down the integrity of the metal and the steel, and it breaks it right down to the molecular structure, the atomic levels, where it loses integrity on a whole different level. So this can't handle that. Even if this was so, you still couldn't put that kind of weight, that capacity on the building. Couldn't shed that kind of capacity, or couldn't handle that kind of capacity. Today, the number 1 reactor building is shielded with a giant retractable cover. The cover was installed in January. This is the second cover they had on it, by the way, to prevent radioactive dust from escaping into the air. Oh, that's so nice of them. So before they put the cover there, the radioactive dust was escaping, was it? And rainwater from seeping in. So the rainwater seeping in. They're not sadistic at all. As during the spent nuclear fuel recovery from the fuel pools, which is scheduled to begin 2027-28 for the number 1. TEPCO has been conducting checks of the upper floors for potential large cracks. Oh yeah, with their bananas. Moving some debris through a remote-controlled demolition system. Containers holding the waste from the clearance work will be stored temporarily in the solid waste storage facility at the plant. Let me bring that up, actually, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a very convoluted story, this one, unfortunately. I'm not crazy, we're just insane. Here we go. They're nuts, eh? Hi everybody. La, 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 la. All right. Brutalized again on that, are we? So, these containers they're talking about are these. They're going to take stuff out of the nuclear meltdown, put it in containers and stack it in a room like this, which is absurd. And then they're just going to hang their hats there. It's meant to disenfranchise people from any kind of rationality. Known as the number 10 storage facility, it consists of A, B, C buildings. Building A, B have been used since 2024. The newest one, building C, is 50 meters by 180 meters and 20 meters in height. Inside building C, containers are neatly stacked. Of course they are. Japan's very neat. They're very tidy. Containers are neatly stacked. Receptacles with readings of high levels of radiation are sited in the center of the building and surrounded by ones with lower readings. That's what they talked about with the 30 million one-ton bags. Oh, you didn't know about that? That's okay. Such a difficult subject, right? It's pretty brilliant, the lies they've told. So there's 30 million tons of radioactive debris outside the site, off the site. All right, outside the site. You can read that article. That was 2015. There was 150,000 sites like this of one-ton bags. Each bag is 1 ton. 30 million bags is 6 rows of 1-ton pickup trucks wrapped around the planet bumper to bumper. Back to, in contrast, the grounded doors appear jumbled, tree chopped down to create space for tanks. Like the idea of the tanks. I'm playing a video. This is a really important video, actually. This is a very. So this is the BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes in 2013. I showed you pictures of him pretending he was on reactor 4. This is a couple of months before that. Well, I showed you the pictures, not the video, but there's a video of him where he says, "Here I am on reactor 4, but I'm not going to, well, I might play it, but. This is important because he's going to talk about the tanks in 2013. There was 1,000 tanks, more than 1,000, and they were filled up with water from an aquifer underneath the reactors. Because that is always the nuclear plants, oh shit. And national laboratory sites are on aquifers because you know it's going to melt down, go down into the earth, and they want to contain it. They're crazy. But
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer.
Sorry.
Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water.
My apologies.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
Reactor 4 right to the ground, look. Let me go backwards on that for 1 second. So when he talks about 1,000 tanks, they're already filled. This is the pictures they're talking. This is what the tanks are mostly of these small tanks. There's no way you can build 1,000 big tanks on those sites. It takes over a month or something to build a single tank. And this picture here, this is the debris. You keep it outdoors. You can't put it in a building because of the toxicity of it. People that worked here died, right? Anybody that done that job would have died from that exposures. The homeless, the destitute, the victims of society. Super important anyway. And working space for operators were left lying for some parts on the ground while waste containers were piling up in the ocean. And working space for operators were left lying on some parts of the ground. There's no academics there, there's no scientist there, there's no journalist goes to Fukushima. Right? It's absurd to suggest there is. You couldn't drag an academic within 100 kilometers of that place unless they're stupid. In addition, TEPCO still relies on a makeshift storage area in areas along the coast that stores waste with an impermeable liner spread underground and covered with soil. Again, these are lunatics, what they're talking about. The company intends to do none of it. Everything that they can is going directly into the ocean. The company, because otherwise you have a toxic wasteland, you can't get back on the site. The company intends to house all the radioactive waste in indoor facilities. What are you talking about? Everything is vented. You can't get back in the building. We're not talking about sealed. And even if it's sealed, it's still vented. It's not sealed. That's the problem with nuclear waste worldwide. Oh, no, well, they don't know what to do with the fuel. What the problem with the fuel is the splitting atoms directly into the environment. Each reactor core, when it comes out of the reactor, and for the rest of its life, is still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses. Every second. That's why every nuclear power plant worldwide is surrounded, almost 99% of them are surrounded by farms. There's only less than a handful, 2 handfuls that are not surrounded by farms worldwide. And I mean surrounded too. If you zoom back from a satellite image of that nuclear plant, it's farmland. From a satellite, is all you'll see. Facilities by physical to safeguard the containment from fire risk and corrosions. Well, you get cyclones there, for goodness sake. So if you store it out in the open with cyclones, how are you going to protect it? How are you going to safeguard it? If you store all your waste in the same building, so what are they up to? What are they going to do with this stuff? Because the numbers are stunning. You're talking about huge numbers. And I'll do some of the numbers for you. Before the nuclear disaster, the nuclear plant had 8 waste storage facilities. Number 9 and number 10 facilities were added after 2011. If everything goes as planned, the plant's capacity for waste storage would rise to 216,000 cubic meters by the end of the fiscal 2028, sufficient for an estimated 207 cubic meters of waste to be produced by the time. But the final number, just bear with me. The industry is insane. It's actually insane, eh? And because they spent, their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents spent their whole lives lying about it, right? They believed the lies. The children are growing up so accustomed to hearing the same lies over and over and over, like the victims in your high school. The decommissioning of the Fukushima No plant estimated would be about 5.6 million cubic meters of radioactive waste. The Atomic Energy Society of Japan, which was created after Fukushima, by the way. So 5.6 million cubic meters. So you can only put a cubic meter in the back of a 1-ton truck, basically. So each truck is 20 feet. That's the best way to work this one out. So you multiply, you got 112 million feet divided by 5,000. Each one, now it's a mile. So 22,400 miles of 1-ton trucks, bumper to bumper, from a single site. And that each container, just going up and leaning on it for 5 minutes, you'll die that afternoon or next week, or next month at the latest, because your organs melted. It took several hours or days for that to play out and kill you. So, like the way you're talking about fuel particulates, absurd, like you're going to put them together in a containment where they can mix with each other, that will cause a chain reaction. So who knows what they're really up to? They're probably just, we know they dumped absurd amount already into the ocean. Don't think for a second they won't do that. It's flushing, like every time the typhoons come through here or snow, it's a hideous amount getting flushed into the ocean. The water that comes down the mountain flushes right through this site. It's intended to do that in case there's a meltdown. And boy, they had the meltdowns. We have an extinction event playing out. And if you look at, go scroll through my live streams, you're going to see presentation after presentation after presentation of emaciated whales of every species, not just gray, which is the story they've been pushing for a couple of months. The entire situation more concerning is little progress was made in discussion of the final disposal of the vast amount of radioactive waste. Everything is splitting atoms directly into the environment, and that from that site. It's a disease factory. Moreover, waste produced from the treatment of contaminated water, such as slurry and sorbents, is not included in the material bound for the storage facilities. So the waste produced from the treatment of contaminated water, first off, they're not treating any water. You can't, like if you put, this is not like an oil filter for a car or a water filter for your house. Just fill up the bucket with these filters and throw it in a garbage bag and drop it off somewhere. So the slurries. So like if this kind of, here's how this filter works. The water is coming from the tank. It's at multiple sieverts per liter. 3 sieverts in proximity is a lethal dose to you for 20 minutes. You'll die that day for sure. 10 minutes, you might die later that week. But we're talking about multiple sieverts. I'll just give you an example, I guess, per liter. And they're only, the one I'm going to show you is just beta. The story's crazy. It's just so fantastical. It just defies any rationale for the average person, and I get that. La 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 la. There we go. Gotta be, no. Yes. There we go. Food. New folder. Should be right here. Yeah, it's everything you click on is you want to share it, right? 2 sieverts an hour of beta radiation emitted from a single liter of water. Well, you can't just have beta. You can't filter that because every few seconds, then you got four sieverts, and every liter is another 2 sieverts. A beta, especially 2.2, if you read the study. So after let's say after 1 hour, thousands of sieverts in the filter. That's like a rifle round from 50 feet away or 100 feet away. You're getting a lethal dose. You can't change the filter. Not only that, you're going to have gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas in the filter. That's why they only acknowledge betas. Eh? But if you put betas and alphas, neutrons, and gammas together in the filter, you're going to have a chain reaction. It's going to melt down. And you're certainly not going to be taking these. They allegedly got over 4,000 of these filters that were from filtering the radiation, but they don't do that anywhere else on the planet because it's simply not true. Right? It's not replicated anywhere else. There's no studies to quantify it. And TEPCO has made a Fukushima plant into a machine for generating radioactive water. They have to pour water over the reactors as it is, but the whole country, when it rains, every leaf that washes into the ocean is incredibly radioactive. Every plant, every species, all the dirt that's washing out into your ocean, which is producing over 50% of the oxygen on the planet from the Pacific Ocean. TEPCO will transport parts of the waste into the #1 large waste storage facility during the current fiscal year. The storage area measures 23 meters by 186 meters and 17 meters in height. Underwent seismic retrofitting recently and is ready for use. Right, so it's okay for seismics, it's going to last 1,000 years, like tin cans and pop bottles. Will transport parts of the waste into the #1 large-scale waste storage facility. Large scale. So storing heavy waste, pretending that you can filter it, is absurd. Let me go back to that part. Waste produced from the treatment of contaminated water, such as slurry, which would be thousands of sieverts, and sorbents, which is dozens of sieverts, is not included in the material bound for the storage facility. Well, where is it going? The whole question is crazy. The big question is the total amount of radioactive waste that will be generated. The utility estimated will be around 8,000 cubic meters of waste by the end of fiscal 2036. 800,000 cubic meters of waste is 3,200 miles of one-ton trucks, bumper to bumper. Right, that's a good way to visualize it. 3,200 miles. Think of a spot 3,200 miles away from you, and think of one-ton trucks of nuclear waste, bumper to bumper, and that if you're stopped alongside of it, you're going to die that night. The storage area, which measured 23 meters by 186 meters, just driving past that line means everybody drives past those. I say there was 3,200 one-ton pickup trucks. Where just one-ton pickup truck, wherever it is on the highway, people that are passing by it are getting lethal doses. You know, there was a story a couple of years ago in Australia about a special measurement tool they used as cesium. It was like 1 gram of cesium. And they had lost a piece of equipment, it was for measuring ground or something for construction sites, had come apart and it had rolled off the truck on the highway, which was like a 1,200-mile highway through Australia's deserts and everything else. And all they done was took a Geiger counter and drove the same route, and they found it because the Geiger counter picked it up. But they actually acknowledged that anybody who drove past it at highway speeds, which we assume is 60 miles per hour, got a dose of X-ray. We're talking from a gram. These containers would hold many, many pounds. And so your organs will melt just driving past these things. The truck driver couldn't survive the truck being sat in the front seat. And the truck behind him couldn't survive, if it was empty, he still couldn't survive being in that position. So we've done the math on this one. 5.6 million. So the Atomic Energy advising the decommissioning on the #1 plant estimated will be 5.6 million cubic meters. Well, that's a really interesting one. Unless reduction measures are taken. What do you mean? How are you going to reduce radioactive waste mixed in with other stuff? You can't. All right, your site is too radioactive. You're going to use it for 10 minutes and you got to get off the site where you're trying to, you can't use any of the equipment ever again. Anything that touches the stuff has to be put in a nuclear repository for 1 million years. The decommissioning of one plant estimated will be about 5.6 million cubic meters of radioactive waste. That is equal to, and we done the numbers earlier, that's equal to 22,000 miles plus a one-ton truck bumper to bumper just from Fukushima site of high level. Now they picked up 30 million one-ton bags in 2015. They never stopped picking up bags from 2015 or 2019. So there's more than likely, there's evidence suggesting there was at least 60 million one-ton bags, which is 12 rows of traffic wrapped around the planet. 12 rows of one-ton pickup trucks of nuclear waste wrapped around the entire planet. Just from the Fukushima site. And that's not from, I'm sorry, not from the site, but that's from the cities and communities far away from Fukushima. Al Jazeera, a couple of years ago, were doing a foreign correspondence with people in the know, and they suggested 60 million.
There's about 60 million tons.
Do that again.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence. So
60 million off-site, not on-site, but off-site. 60 million one-ton bags. That's an event, see? Each one of these bags, if you dumped it into your drinking water supply for a city of 1 million people, you can never drink that water. Lethal doses by the container, and in some instances, like by the liter of that water. You can't filter that. It's going directly into the ocean. Unless reduction measures are taken. That's what reductions are. We're going to rewrite the rules, like they done during the Manhattan Project, and they don't give a damn. As long as they got exorbitant amounts of prestige and money from their betrayal of humanity and the 8 million species. TEPCO plans to sort the radiation waste by radioactive levels for interim storage. The projected 800,000 cubic meters of waste, 70% is eligible to be held in solid waste storage facilities. Is eligible. Well, you don't have a repository, you don't have any way of storing it, so everything is vented directly into the environment. So this is catastrophic. You got 5.6 million one-ton containers. Can you imagine how big of a stack that's going to be? Because we're not talking about the one-ton bags, we're talking about containers. Like you would need a massive factory line to produce that many containers to hold 5.6 million. You know, look at the logistics of welders welding up 5.6 million containers for nuclear waste, which would have high criteria, right? I'm scared to death of what they're actually doing with it. I don't know. I don't want to imagine. And everything has to be vented. So you're not going to put this in a containment area and have these particular attributes. So they're doing something else with it and not telling us. Well, telling the planet. Well, the company aims to halve the volume of the waste. It says to recycle the remaining 30%. How do you recycle nuclear waste? Tin cans, forks, children's toys, bumpers for your cars. That's what they do. They're lunatics, eh? There is no incentive not to be evil, and that's the route they're going to take every time. The corporate personhood route. What maximizes profits rules the day. Rules the corporate meeting, I guess. Well, the company aims to halve the volume. How are you going to halve the volume? Well, they can compress it, right? Is one way, but that's about it. But they have other interpretations of what halving the volume means we've covered over the years, and they're not very good stuff. It is set to recycle the remaining 30% from a nuclear meltdown site. You're going to recycle stuff from a nuclear meltdown. Like a normal reactor before Fukushima, 90% of it was destined to a repository of some kind forever. A nuclear meltdown recycling 30% of of a hideous amount is unconscionable. This is their routine, right? They have nothing to do with humans. Scrap metal or concrete waste with a dose of 0.005 millisieverts. Like again, right? There's 1,000 microsieverts in a millisievert, for instance. It's 1,000 millisieverts in a sievert. And there's no waste on that site that's 0.005 millisieverts per hour. It will be cut or partially crushed to reduce the size, but there's nothing there that would have that particular low attribute. Everything there is many, many, many dozens and hundreds of millisieverts. There's nothing there at that low of a number on the site. There's nothing. There can't be. You covered the whole site from explosions. You cannot claw that stuff, put that stuff back in the genie back in the bottle. For waste with a dose of less than that, TEPCO will consider having them melted for recycling. Well, if you melt it, you're just going to liberate the isotopes back into the environment. You can't destroy them. TEPCO, which is not a decommissioning authority, will consider. Well, they're not authority. They don't have any sovereignty over any country. They're a corporate personhood. That was actually nationalized by the Japan government immediately after Fukushima, because they were on the stock market. Right, they're a corporate person. The TEPCO will consider having them melted. There's no accountability. Where's the institutions? Where's the studies? Where's the academics? Where's the outrage? Where's the anti-nuclear folks? They avoid Fukushima. They scream about everything else. But the facility for melting metal will likely be completed between 2032-34. They had 19 20-foot incinerators built in Fukushima Prefecture after Fukushima to incinerate nuclear waste in the farmers' fields. All you're doing is liberating the radioactive isotopes and atoms back and particulates back into the ecosystem, so it can haunt everything for millions of years again. Every time you have the big forest fires we're having in Canada are a huge radioactive fallout on America. It's a hideous amount of radioactive fallout going to America. It's a hideous amount. The melted nuclear fuel debris is estimated at 880 tons at the number 1 through 3. So why would you have such a low number at those 3 reactors? Well, you wouldn't, right? First off, there's nothing left at reactor 4. That's what reactor 4 looks like 150 feet above that. So I don't think they're not going to lie to you to keep that lie alive, because that's what they've been doing. The melted nuclear fuel, or fuel debris, TEPCO plans to eventually retrieve all the fuel, but it has yet to determine a final disposal method. They'll retrieve all the fuel from buildings that don't exist. So a guest professor from Nuclear Decommissioning University of Fukai called on TEPCO, he's a guest here, he's a professor guest at the university, to aggressively reduce the waste volume. Since utilities' primary focus is an operating power plant, they tend to invest less in the management of nuclear waste in terms of money and human resources, because the shareholders. Recovering the melted fuel is certainly a daunting challenge, but TEPCO should also grapple with how to lessen the waste volume simultaneously. But you can't recover anything from a building to 4 buildings that don't exist anymore. And we already covered that one. That was when we started off with it. I guess that's it for tonight, by the looks of it. I'm going to play Less Than a Gram again. I want to hear that song again. It's been dancing through my head since we played it at the beginning. I played it quite a few times before we went live there, but everything goes into the black hole here that I'm doing. The world is glazing. So we're going to start in the song with a song we started off with called Less Than a Gram. And there's links in the description or go to the playlist if you can't find it. If you're watching this after, you won't be able to find the link in the chat room. I'm struggling to get back to where I left off here. Oh. There we are. I can't tell the difference. I can tell you this much. This is 3 recent grey whales, for instance. All whales of all species are looking like this. The food chain is broken. They're starving to death. And keep telling these lies, which is the catalyst of the extinction, the food chain being broken, is not helping our planet. Promoting nuclear is not going to help our planet. All right. Let me get my shit together here. I have one more boo at the poll. I'll get there. I'm almost there. Huh. Oh, well, there's another song, actually. I'm going to try that. I'm going to play 2 songs. I'm going to play Whole Body Count, End of September, and Less Than a Gram again. I'm intrigued. That's a 5-minute song, and then we'll play that one. Or I'll play this one first, and then I'm going to play that one. And does Fukushima 1 gram fuel loss of reactor 2 claim prove the nuclear industry is untrustworthy? That was just trying to get people into the right frame. The censorship in me is always brutal anyway, right? Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. See everybody on the next show. And we'll play this one, and then we're going to play Whole Body Explosion. Actually, we'll play that one. Less Than a Gram first. Then I'll play the next one. Oh. I'll be hopefully back tomorrow night. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody.
Right beside old Unit 3 sits a shell-marked waste, you see. Tanks of resin stacked with care, holding what the pumps caught there. TEPCO filed 2 plans to show. One says yes, the other no. Each awaits a coming call. Neither clears the path at all. That's what they've got from Unit 2, and that was a lot. Fuel remains in buried rooms while they measure water plumes. Early 30s, so they say, when the work might get underway. Decommissioned down the line, mid-century's hopeful sign. 880 tons remain, none retrieved from 3's domain. They debate what space to claim, still the building stays the same. Less than a gram, that's what they've got from Unit 2. A careful shot, not from 3.
Okay, we're gonna play. We're gonna play this one right here. Whole body exposure, end of September, Korean Records. Sweet.
End of September.
Nice.
White House says the NRC is too slow, so pressured now to speed up approvals. They call it an NRC reshuffle, say it's just how work gets done. A few positions get shifted, then the whole place starts to run. 60 days to shape it, 60 days to make it fit. Efficient and timely becomes how they talk. They don't say rush it, they say keep it moving. They don't say cut, they say streamline. A room that used to examine now gets graded by the clock. A pause becomes a problem, an inquiry becomes a block. One chain, one channel, one desk that takes the weight. In the old way of stopping to look becomes too late. The commission wants consistency, the project manager wants closure. And it won't break loud, it won't flash red, it'll feel like normal right up to the edge. End of September, oh caution, new deadline. End of September, fast track, slow consequences. End of September, time gets the last word. End of September, and the outrage learns to wait. After the deadline, the pace becomes the culture. What can't be explained goes uncounted. Small warnings get filed as handled and closed. If it didn't stop the schedule, it became acceptable. NRC does the check-in and the oversight stays pigeonholed. Speed is easy to prove, safety is harder to show, and what gets missed doesn't announce itself. End of September, oh caution, new deadline. End of September, fast track, slow consequences. End of September, time gets the last word. End of September, the outrage learns to wait. End of September, the gate still stands, but it swings a little faster than it used to.